The night on that alien world was silent, too silent. The human sat alone inside his small shelter, staring at the dim flame of a lantern. The light flickered, throwing long shadows across the wooden walls. Silence had become his companion, silence and distance. He was far from Earth, far from the battles that had carved scars on his body and his mind. This was his place of exile, a corner of the universe where no one wanted to remember his name. But silence never lasts forever. It began with a sound. At first it was faint, almost hidden beneath the whistle of the strange alien wind that twisted through the tall black trees outside. He thought it was nothing, just the storm playing tricks. But then it came again. A knock. Soft, uncertain but real. His back stiffened. Nobody ever came to his door, not in the day, and certainly not at night. The villagers did not like him. To them, he was always the human, the outsider who had fought in a war that was not theirs. They kept their distance, whispering as he passed. For years, his nights had been empty, his door untouched. That was why the sound made his heart beat faster. Another knock followed. Louder, clear. He rose slowly from his chair. His mind went back to old memories. Dark alleys on Earth, raids in the middle of the night, boots pounding before the firefight began. His hand reached for the old weapon that leaned in the corner, more out of habit than need. The weapon was useless now, but it gave him comfort. The third knock came, and he knew it was no dream. Someone was really there. He moved to the door, every step heavy. When he opened it, the night air rushed in, cold and sharp. And then he saw her. An alien woman stood there, cloaked in a dark fabric that clung to her shoulders, wet from the mist. Her face was tired, beautiful in a way that carried sorrow more than grace. Beside her were two small children, clutching her legs, eyes wide with fear and curiosity. They looked up at him like he was something both dangerous and necessary. The human blinked. He recognized her. The widow. He had seen her from a distance in the village market, always quiet, always moving quickly. People whispered about her, too. Her husband had died in a border raid. She was left alone with her children in a world that gave little mercy to widows. Yet she had never spoken to him. Until now. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear enough. Please, may I enter? The human did not move at once. His eyes flicked from her face to the children. Their small hands gripped her cloak tightly. Their clothes were thin, too thin for the cold. One child's lip quivered, as though he wanted to cry but dared not. Why here? The human asked at last, his tone low, rough from disuse. You know who I am. Yes, she whispered. Her eyes lifted to his, and for a moment he saw both fear and strength in them. And that is why I came. Her words confused him, but before he could answer, the wind howled, carrying with it the distant cries of animals from the forest. The children shivered. She drew them closer. No one else will open their doors, she said. No one will hear me. You are my only hope. The human felt a weight in his chest. He had tried to cut himself off from this world, to live as if nothing and no one could reach him. But here she was, standing on his doorstep with children in the dark, asking for something he did not yet understand. You don't know what you're asking, he muttered. I do, she answered, stronger this time. Her voice carried the kind of courage that only comes when someone has lost everything and has nothing left to lose. She looked down at her children, then back at him. My children need safety. They need a father's presence. I cannot give them both alone. The words struck him harder than the knocks on the door. He stared at her, unable to look away. He had spent years burying the soldier inside him, trying to be nothing but a shadow. And yet, she was calling him out of the shadows. Not as a warrior, not as a killer, but as something he never thought he could be again. A father. The children's eyes met his, big, wet, filled with fear but also with a silent plea. His throat tightened. Memories rose unbidden. Comrades he could not save, civilians who had begged him for help in ruined cities. He had turned his back on all of it. But could he turn his back now? The night seemed to hold its breath. The forest outside had gone quiet. The only sound was the crackle of the lantern flame behind him and the steady beat of his own heart. The woman's hand shook as she pulled the cloak tighter around her children. I would not come if I had another path. But tonight, I knock at your door, human, because I believe you understand what it means to protect. You understand loss. That is why I ask. He stood in the doorway, torn between the walls he had built and the strange warmth beginning to crack through them. For the first time in years, someone had come to him not with fear or hate, but with trust. Desperate trust, but trust all the same. The unexpected knock had opened more than a door. It had opened a choice, and choices, he knew, could change everything. The human stood in the doorway, silent, staring at the woman and her children. The cold night air pressed against his back, but he did not move. The widow did not step inside either. She waited, her eyes shining with both fear and courage. For a long moment no one spoke. The only sound was the restless wind pushing at the edges of the house. At last he stepped aside. Come in. Her shoulders eased just a little. She guided the children through the doorway. They clung to her cloak as though the walls of the house were safer than the entire village outside. The human closed the door behind them, shutting out the wind, shutting them all into the dim glow of the single lantern. The woman pulled back her hood. Her face was pale, marked by sleepless nights. Her dark eyes moved around the room, taking in the rough table, the single chair, the weapon resting in the corner. It was clear this place was not meant for visitors. It was a shelter for one man alone. Yet tonight, it held more than solitude. You should not be here, the human said. His voice was calm but heavy. The villagers will not forgive you for stepping into my house. They already do not forgive me, she answered softly. Her words carried no bitterness, only truth. They turn their faces away when I walk past. They whisper when my children ask for food. Their doors are closed to me, closed tighter each day. The human frowned. Why? Because I have no husband, she said. Her hand brushed over her children's hair. Because in our world, a widow is not a whole being, and children without a father are seen as a burden. Her voice shook for a moment, but she steadied it quickly. She had not come to cry. She had come with purpose. The human said nothing, but he understood. He had seen enough cultures, enough wars, to know how societies made rules that crushed the weak. A woman alone with children was easy prey. The widow lowered herself to sit on the edge of the wooden bench, pulling the children close. They leaned against her, their small eyes still watching the human with a mix of curiosity and fear. I came here tonight, she said slowly, because I have no choice left. My children are hungry. I can fight for food. I can work with my hands, but I cannot fight against the shadows that follow us. And they will not survive without protection. Without a father. The human felt a sharp pull in his chest. He wanted to look away, but her words held him still. You want me to protect you? He asked. She lifted her chin. Not only protect. I want you to stand with us, to be part of us, to give my children what they lost when their father died. The words fell heavy in the small room. For years, the human had built walls around himself. He had told himself he was finished with bonds, finished with promises. He had lost too much already. To take this step, it was not small. It was everything. You do not know me, he said at last. You do not know what I have done. You only know the rumors. I know enough, she replied. I know you survived. I know you fight when others run. And I know you are human, different from my people, stronger in ways they do not understand. That is why I came to you. Her voice did not tremble now. It was steady, filled with something stronger than desperation. It was resolve. The children shifted. The smaller one whispered something in her alien tongue. She stroked his hair and hushed him, then looked back at the human. They do not need a hero from stories. They only need a man who will not walk away when danger comes. Her words dug deep into him. Memories rose like ghosts. Faces of soldiers who had trusted him, civilians who had begged him for help. He had walked away from so much. He had told himself it was necessary. But here, in this small house, two children looked at him with eyes that silently begged him not to walk away again. He turned toward the weapon in the corner. Dust had gathered on it. For years he had let it rest untouched. He had sworn to never pick it up again. But the sight of the children made him wonder if the promise he made to himself was already breaking. "You ask for something dangerous," he said quietly. "If I take this step, your enemies become mine. And mine are not small." The widow's gaze did not waver. "Danger is already at my door. Tonight I chose to knock at yours. If you send me away, I face it alone. If you let me stay, maybe we face it together." The human breathed slowly. His heart was heavy, but beneath the weight he felt a spark he had not felt in years. Something alive. Something dangerous, yes, but also human. The widow reached out, placing her hand gently on the table. Not too close to him, but close enough to show she was not afraid. "I am not asking for pity. I am asking for a chance. For my children. For their future. You understand loss. Now I ask if you will understand hope." The lantern flickered. The room seemed smaller, warmer, filled with a tension that was more than fear. It was choice. And as he stood there, looking at her, he knew the unexpected knock had only been the beginning. The true question had only just been spoken. The night stretched on inside the small shelter, heavy with unspoken words. The widow's plea still echoed in the human's mind. "My children need a father." He sat in silence, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. The children had fallen asleep against their mother, curled like two fragile creatures seeking warmth in a world that offered none. The human watched them from across the room. He had faced enemy soldiers, alien beasts, and the endless cold of space. But this sight unsettled him more than all of it. It was not fear. It was something deeper, a pull he did not want but could not push away. When morning came, the village stirred outside. The widow rose quietly, smoothing her children's hair before they woke. She looked at the human with cautious eyes, waiting for his decision. He said nothing. Instead, he opened the door and let the morning light spill in. "Go," he said flatly. "If you stay too long, they will notice." Her lips tightened, but she nodded. She woke the children, guided them outside, and left without another word. The human stood in the doorway, watching as the villagers turned their heads to stare at her, whispering behind their hands. Their eyes shifted to him too, and the whispers grew louder. By midday, the rumors spread like fire. The human took her in. The widow is desperate. She dares to bring her shame to his door. The human felt the weight of their stares as he walked to the market later. Stalls lined the dusty street, filled with strange fruits, dried roots, and alien fabrics. But the villagers made no room for him. Where he passed, silence followed, broken by whispers once he was gone. He had lived with this isolation for years, but now it burned sharper. Near the center of the market, he saw the widow. She stood at a stall, trying to trade scraps of cloth for bread. The merchant shook his head and pushed her away. The children clung to her skirt, their faces hollow with hunger. The human clenched his fists. He did not want to step forward. This was not his fight. But when he saw the children's eyes, empty and tired, something inside him broke. He moved to the stall, pulled out a small pouch of coins he had saved, and dropped it on the counter. "Give her what she needs," he said. The merchant hesitated, eyes flicking between the widow and the human. But coins were coins, and greed outweighed disdain. He handed over bread and fruit, muttering curses under his breath. The widow looked at the human in shock. For a moment, their eyes locked, and gratitude softened her face. But around them, the villagers began to murmur louder. Some spat on the ground. Others shook their heads. "Disgrace. She ties herself to the outsider. He will bring ruin." The widow lowered her gaze and turned away, clutching the food. The human followed her out of the market, ignoring the stares that pierced his back. When they reached the edge of the village, she stopped. "You should not have done that," she said softly. "They would have let your children starve," he replied. She looked at him, pain clear in her eyes. "Yes, But now they will turn against you more. And against us. You do not understand our ways. The human laughed bitterly. I have fought on 100 worlds. I understand cruelty well enough. It hides behind rules, behind words like tradition. But cruelty is cruelty. Her face softened, but her voice was steady. This is not Earth, human. Here, a widow must either fade into silence or find a protector. That is why I came to you. Not because you are kind, but because you are strong enough to stand against them. He stared at her, conflicted. Her words struck deep. He had spent years hiding, avoiding bonds, avoiding fights. And yet, by opening his door last night, he had already stepped into her war. That evening, when the sun dipped behind the jagged hills, the human returned to his shelter. The widow arrived again, this time openly. Some villagers followed with their eyes, whispering harshly as she walked. She ignored them, her children trailing behind. Inside, she placed the bread on the table, dividing it into pieces for her children first. The human watched as the children ate quickly, their small hands shaking with hunger. His chest tightened. This was no battlefield, but it felt like one, the battle between his solitude and the pull of something greater. When the children finally slept, the widow sat across from him. The silence stretched, heavy as stone. You still have not answered me, she said. He met her gaze. You ask me to be a father, to protect you, to fight your battles. Do you know what that means? If I say yes, there is no turning back. Your people will never forgive you, and they will never forgive me. Her hands folded in her lap, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. I do not ask because it is easy. I ask because it is the only way. My children need more than food. They need someone who will not walk away. The human's breath slowed. He looked at the children, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. He looked at her, her face tired but unyielding, and he felt the walls around his heart cracking. The clash was not only between him and her people. It was inside him. The war between the man he had been and the man he could become. The nights after the market incident were no longer quiet. The human noticed it first in the way the villagers looked at him. Longer, sharper, as if they were waiting for him to slip. The whispers had grown louder too. What once had been a distant murmur was now a pointed hiss whenever he passed. The widow's human, curse upon us. Danger follows them both. The widow knew it as well. She walked with her head low, guiding her children quickly through the streets. Doors that had once opened halfway to her now stayed firmly shut. It was as if, by stepping into the human's home, she had crossed an invisible line. And in their culture, lines once crossed could never be erased. But the true danger was not just gossip. It came from shadows beyond the village. On the fourth night, as the children slept in the human's shelter, the widow spoke of it for the first time. Her voice was low, her hands trembling slightly as she folded the cloak around her shoulders. They will come, she whispered. The human frowned. Who? My husband's killers, she said. Her eyes stared into the dim lantern flame as if she could see their faces there. They do not forgive. They do not forget. When he fell in battle, I was spared only because I fled. But they know I live. And now they will hear whispers that I am not alone. The human leaned back, his jaw tight. He had expected trouble from the villagers, but not from old enemies. Why tell me this now? He asked. Because you deserve to know what you step into, she answered. If you take us as yours, you take their hatred too. For a long time, silence filled the room. Only the sound of the children's slow breathing broke it. The human stared at them, sleeping peacefully under the thin blanket, unaware of the storm gathering around them. Enemies I can handle, he said finally. It is betrayal I fear more. Her eyes met his, steady and strong. I will not betray you. The words were simple, but in them he felt a weight heavier than any oath he had ever heard in his soldier days. The next morning, signs appeared. Tracks near the forest edge, boot marks that did not belong to the villagers. Broken branches, the kind made by scouts moving silently through trees. The human had seen them on 100 worlds. They were marks of hunters. That evening, he sharpened the old blade he kept hidden under the floorboards. His weapon of war was useless now, its power cell drained years ago. But steel still cut. Steel could still protect. The widow watched him quietly. "You are preparing," she said. He did not look up. "If danger comes, it will not find me sleeping." She stepped closer, her voice low. "You could send us away now. Pretend none of this touched you. No one would blame you for shutting your door." The human finally raised his eyes. They were hard, but beneath the hardness was something she had not seen before. Something almost like belonging. "I already opened the door. That choice is behind me." Her lips parted as if to speak, but she said nothing. Instead, she looked at him with quiet understanding, and for the first time since her husband's death, a small spark of hope touched her face. But the villagers were watching. That night, as the human walked back from fetching water, a group of men blocked his path. Their faces were painted with contempt. "You bring her into your den," one spat. "You think we will suffer for your choices?" The human's gaze was steady. "Your whispers mean nothing to me." "Whispers?" Another man growled. "No, it is her enemies. They will come for her, and they will not care if they burn the whole village down to reach her. And when they come, you will be the cause." The human stepped forward, close enough that the man had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. "If they come," he said in a low, dangerous voice, "they will find me waiting." The men fell silent, their anger cracking under the weight of his words. They stepped aside, but their glares burned into his back as he walked away. That night, the forest whispered again, not with wind, but with movement. He stood at the edge of his shelter, staring into the darkness, blade in hand. He could feel eyes watching from the trees, waiting, measuring. Inside, the widow sat beside her children, holding them close. She did not need to see the shadows to know they were there. She had lived with that fear since the day her husband fell. But tonight felt different. Tonight the fear was shared. The human stood guard until the first light of dawn, silent and unmoving. The danger was not yet upon them, but it was close. And he knew when it arrived, it would not test only his strength. It would test the fragile bond growing between him, the widow, and the children who looked at him with silent hope. The hidden dangers were no longer hidden. They were coming. The morning sun spread weak light across the alien village. The human had not slept. He had stood through the night, guarding the small shelter as if his body alone could keep the shadows away. Inside, the widow and her children slept, unaware of how long his eyes had remained on the forest line, waiting for movement that never came. When the children woke, they found him sitting near the door, sharpening his blade with calm, steady hands. Their small eyes studied him carefully. Until now, he had only been the stranger their mother trusted, a man of another world. But something about his silent watch made them see him differently, like a wall between them and the dangers outside. The younger child, curious, crept closer. He did not speak, but his hand reached out, pointing at the blade. The human looked down, then at the boy. For a moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he turned the blade so the flat side shone in the morning light. "Sharp," the human said simply, his voice low. "Dangerous, but safe if you respect it." The boy's eyes widened. It was the first time the human had spoken directly to him. The child nodded quickly, as if he understood more than words. The older sibling pulled him back nervously, but the boy smiled before retreating. The widow had been watching from the corner. Her face was tired, but her eyes softened as she saw her children's reaction. For the first time in many moons, they looked at someone with more than fear. Later that day, the human went with them to the forest edge to gather wood. The villagers kept their distance, some turning away, others muttering curses. The children stayed close to their mother, but every few steps, they looked up at the human, watching the way he walked, the way his hand rested near the blade at his belt. He was different from everyone else they knew, different from their lost father, yet strangely familiar in his quiet strength. The forest was thick with tall, twisted trees and roots that seemed alive. While the widow gathered small branches, the children chased after glowing insects that floated like sparks through the air. The human kept his eyes on the shadows. He knew forests. He knew how silence could hide teeth. And he was right. It happened quickly. The younger child wandered too far, following the glowing trail of insects, when the ground near him shifted. A creature rose from the leaves, thin, long-limbed, its eyes glinting with hunger. It had waited, silent, for prey small enough to strike. The boy froze, his scream caught in his throat. The widow dropped her bundle of wood, terror flooding her face. "No!" she cried. But before the creature could lunge, the human moved. His body reacted before thought. In 2 strides, he was there, placing himself between the child and the beast. The blade flashed in the dim light, a single swing cutting the air with deadly precision. The creature shrieked, its body collapsing into the dirt before it could touch the boy. The boy stumbled back, trembling. The human stood over the fallen creature, chest rising slowly, eyes still locked on the shadows. Only when he was certain no second attack was coming did he lower the blade. The boy's small hands clutched his cloak, tears streaming silently down his face. The human knelt, lowering himself to the child's level. His voice was calm, steady, the way soldiers spoke to one another after surviving fire. "You are safe," he said simply. "I will not let them take you." The boy looked at him with wide, trembling eyes. Then slowly he nodded. For the first time he believed those words. The widow rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her son, but her eyes found the human's. Gratitude burned there, deep and fierce. No words passed between them, but the silence spoke enough. "You saved what I could not." That night, back at the shelter, the children clung to their mother as always, but their eyes kept drifting toward the human. When he sat by the door, sharpening his blade again, the younger child crept closer once more. This time, instead of fear, he brought something small in his hands, a broken toy carved from wood. He placed it on the table in front of the human, shy but determined. The human raised an eyebrow. "For me?" The boy nodded. The human picked up the toy, studying its rough edges. He turned it in his hand, then gave a small nod. "Thank you." His voice was soft, almost gentle. The boy smiled for the first time. A small smile, fragile but real. The widow watched, her heart tightening. This was the bond she had hoped for, the bond she had begged for when she knocked on his door. Later, as the children finally fell asleep, the widow spoke quietly. "You are becoming what they need." The human kept his eyes on the shadows outside the window. "What about what the village thinks?" She shook her head. "The village does not matter. My children do." He said nothing, but his hand tightened on the wooden toy. He realized something then. The war he had thought was over had only changed shape. This was not a fight for borders or pride. This was a fight for 2 small lives that now looked at him as their shield. And for the first time in years, he did not feel alone. The days after the forest attack passed in uneasy calm. The children now looked at the human with trust, their small steps often following his without fear. The widow, too, carried herself differently. Her eyes no longer held only grief but something steadier, almost like hope. For the first time since her husband's death, she did not feel completely alone. But peace is always fragile. It began with smoke on the horizon. The human noticed it while standing guard near the edge of the village. A black column rising into the gray sky, too thick to be from a cooking fire. His instincts sharpened at once. He had seen this before on battlefields across worlds. Smoke was the mark of a raid. By evening, the villagers gathered in panic. News spread fast. Travelers from a nearby settlement had been attacked. Raiders, old enemies, the same ones the widow had spoken of. The widow's face went pale when she heard. She pulled her children close, her hands shaking. "They are here," she whispered. The human's jaw tightened. "How far?" "Too close," she said, her voice trembling. "If they struck the outer settlements, they will come here next. They always finish what they start." The villagers looked at the human with anger, their fear twisting into blame. "This is because of her." one man shouted, pointing at the widow. Her enemies bring death to our doors. Others joined in. Send her out. Let them take her and leave us in peace. The widow clutched her children tighter, her body shielding them from the angry crowd. The human stepped forward, placing himself between her and the villagers. His voice cut through their shouts like steel. If they come, it will not matter who they want. If you throw her out, they will still burn your homes. They will still kill your families. I have seen their kind. Do not fool yourselves. The crowd quieted, though their eyes still burned with resentment. The human turned and led the widow back to his shelter. Once inside, he barred the door and lit the lantern. You must leave, he said quickly. Take the children. Go into the hills. I will buy you time. But the widow shook her head, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. No, running will not save us. They will hunt us until the stars fall. If we hide, they will find us. If we face them, maybe we can survive. The human stared at her. Her courage struck him as hard as her plea had the first night she knocked on his door. She was not just a widow asking for help. She was a mother ready to fight if it meant her children lived. That night, the raiders came. The first sign was the sound. Low horns carried by the wind, a sound meant to spread fear before the blades struck. The villagers scattered into their homes, locking doors and shuttering windows. But fear could not keep out fire. The raiders rode in from the forest, their beasts snarling, their torches setting roofs ablaze. Their armor glinted in the firelight, and their voices shouted in a language of war. Inside the shelter, the children cried softly, their small hands gripping their mother's cloak. The human stood at the door, blade in hand, eyes fixed on the chaos outside. His heart was steady. He had been here before. Not in this world, but in many others. The battlefield was the same everywhere. The widow touched his arm. They want me. If I step outside. No. He cut her off, his voice sharp. If you step outside, you die. And then your children are lost. Stay with them. Whatever happens, stay. The door shook as the first raider slammed against it. The children screamed. The human pushed them back, his body a wall between them and the danger. The wood cracked under another blow. Then the door burst open. A raider stormed inside, eyes burning, blade raised. But before he could strike, the human moved. His blade flashed, cutting through the air, and the raider fell. Blood darkened the floor. More came. 2, then 3, their voices echoing in the small room. The human fought with the precision of a soldier who had not forgotten the art of war. Each swing was controlled, each strike final. The widow shielded her children, but her eyes never left him. For the first time, she saw what it meant when they whispered he was dangerous. Dangerous, but for her children, it meant safety. The fight spilled outside. Flames licked at the night sky as the human faced the raiders in the open. The villagers watched from behind locked doors, fear holding them prisoner. None came to help. Only the widow stood at the doorway, ready to defend her children if he fell. But he did not fall. When the last raider lay silent on the ground, the human stood breathing hard, blood on his blade, firelight casting his shadow long across the dirt. The village was scarred, but still standing. The children peeked from behind their mother, their eyes wide, not with fear now, but with awe. The widow stepped forward, her voice soft but certain. You are not only our protector. Tonight you became our family. The human looked at her, then at the children. For a moment he felt the weight of all he had lost in his past. But standing there, with the fire dying and the night slowly quieting, he realized something had returned. Purpose. The enemy had come. He had stood. And in doing so, he had found a reason to fight again. The village was quiet the next morning, but it was not the peace of calm. It was the silence that comes after fire and fear. Smoke still rose from burned roofs, and the ground bore the marks of blood and ash. The raiders had been driven back, their bodies left where they had fallen. And at the center of it all stood the human, his blade still stained, his face unreadable. The villagers came out slowly, one by one, staring at him with a mix of awe and unease. They had hidden when the battle came, yet it was the human who had fought for their survival. Their whispers were different now, no longer only hateful but uncertain. The outsider saved us. He killed them all. Without him, we would be ashes. The widow stood at her door, her children pressed against her sides. Her eyes followed the human as he walked back from the battlefield. His steps were heavy, but his shoulders were straight. When his eyes met hers, there was no need for words. She had seen everything with her own eyes, the strength, the fury, the choice he had made not only for her family but for the entire village. That evening, when the villagers gathered to bury their dead and repair what they could, the human worked beside them. He carried wood, lifted stones, and stood guard while they rebuilt. No one dared speak against him, though many still kept their distance. Only the widow and her children stayed close, walking where he walked, standing where he stood. Later, when the stars rose, the widow came to him with quiet steps. Her children followed, their small hands gripping the folds of her cloak. "You saved them," she said softly. "Not only us, the whole village." He shook his head. "I saved what I could. The rest was chance." But the widow's eyes did not waver. "No, it was choice. Your choice. You could have turned your back. You could have left us. But you did not. You stood." The children stepped forward, their eyes shining in the starlight. The younger one reached out, small fingers brushing against the human's hand. The older one, shy but braver than before, whispered a single word in their tongue, a word the human had heard before but never from them. "Father." The human froze. His breath caught in his chest. The word was heavy, heavier than any armor he had ever worn, heavier than the blade in his hand. Yet it filled something inside him that had long been empty. The widow's voice trembled, but it was steady enough to carry meaning. "They have chosen, and so have I." The human looked at her, at the children, at the broken village around them. For years, he had lived in exile, believing he had no place, no purpose, nothing left to give. But here, in this small corner of the universe, a woman and her children had asked him to stand. And in standing, he had found something he thought was lost forever. Family. The next morning, the villagers gathered again. Some still muttered in anger, others in doubt. But none could deny the truth. The outsider had fought for them when they had hidden. Their old scorn could not erase what they had seen with their own eyes. A few even bowed their heads when he passed. It was not respect yet, but it was no longer pure hatred. The widow walked beside him openly now. She no longer lowered her gaze. Her children held the human's hands without fear. Together, they stepped through the village like a small island of unity in a sea of whispers. At night, when the fires burned low and the children finally slept, the widow sat across from him. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was steady, like a river flowing toward something new. "You said once you feared betrayal more than enemies," she said quietly. He nodded. "Then hear me now," she continued. "I will not betray you. My children will not betray you. Whatever the world says, whatever dangers come, we are yours. You are ours. That is the bond we make tonight." The human looked at her, at the strength in her eyes, at the fragile but unbreakable hope she carried. He felt the weight of her words settle deep in his heart. Slowly he nodded. "Then I will stand," he said. "Not only as your protector, not only as your shield, but as your family." The widow's lips curved into a faint, trembling smile. For the first time since her husband's death, her heart did not feel empty. For the first time since his exile, the human's heart did not feel hollow. And so the night that had begun with an unexpected knock ended with something greater. A promise, a beginning, a family born not of blood but of choice. Far beyond the village, the stars burned silently. To the universe it was a small story, almost invisible. But to them it was everything.